Alright, this video, it's kind of to conference report in Laura still, I think I say Laura Lila usually, but it's Laura Layla, isn't it? Okay. Well, at least I'm not as bad as Gary at the long-term mangling of names, but I'm near as bad. But then again, a lot of us are not so hot at it. But anyway, okay. So yeah, I made that long video. It was mostly because I made this keynote thing and then I read it out. It's a thought process for me. But it was really on the idea of doing a Kickstarter, but not on the map side, but because I've finally, since I did the video player, I'm back to the video player. And I'm back with full momentum because I have built all this infrastructure that I need well beyond what I had before. Like I don't have a note taker, but I don't necessarily need that right away. But I have the result of all of that is a new infrastructure where it's going to be a lot easier to build things like that. And I could build a new note taker in a few days compared to I think it was a month or two of work to do the original one. It's hard to tell because I'm working always on multiple parts of the thing. Only some of them are just for that functionality. But yeah, it's much more powerful what I have now, and I've come back. So I'm at this crossroads then. I'm finishing the map to some, in my head I'm thinking, well, I'm finishing it to some shareable way so people could play with this toy and see what they think. To really make it so that people could edit the map, that would be some work though, for example. I was actually kind of thinking that I would wrap that up for now and work on this structured conversation system. The conference board, you're saying, no, go whole hog on the mapping side of things. And Laura Layla, I also to you because you were talking about the weather. And in that long video that probably most of you won't want to watch all the way through, I'm asking, what's the most sexiest part of this? Because it kind of all comes together. And my plan that I'm working on is pretty grandiose in the sense it's on this. I want to create cyberspace as we used to visualize it. Virtual environments. It doesn't require a virtual reality technology, but it does require using space, place, and journey, and time, motion, color, visual space, but ideally at least evocative of all kinds of spaces. You know what I mean? If you have on a map a swamp, it evokes other memories or notions of other smells and textures and stuff. Yeah, I think the thing is for me is that what I've decided is that I'd like to try one of, like I have 3 or 4 projects and they all are intertwined in the long run. If you could build these ones and these ones, it'd be easy to build. Or you could build these ones and then this would be easy to build. But which one first and whatnot. But I'd like to take one, let's just take these two, which is you could see how they're intertwined and yet separate. One has to be worked on first. Is a structured conversation site, which basically supports 2 modes. There's the debate, with judgment panels, and you can simulate contests. I consider that a little bit artificial, but it's a fun thing to do with words and argument. And a think tank mode, that's for collaborating and developing ideas, and that's the better of the two. It's always good to have a way to have fun. So there's that structure system, or there's this bookmark. Basically, this is a souped up 2-dimensional bookmark in the shape of a map. Bookmark list, I guess, bookmark page. This bookmark folder. A map is like a bookmark folder. And to do it, I think the thing is that these are things I've been working in my spare time. The Kickstarter idea is like, well, and I want to move. I've decided I want to change. I'm going to get another job or something. And I like this idea of creating software, you know, for 6 months, in 6 months chunks. So like if you had 3 years of work, doing 6 months chunks, and being paid to develop that. And then the customer is like a big community, right? Either a big community of its users, or a community of Kickstarter people that aren't like regular venture capitalists. They're not looking to own the result. They just want it to exist and to be there. They get their perks, or maybe they get a voting spot. Maybe that, you know, there should be some perk or something. And then it's theirs. I just like that idea, you know. And then it's like I go make something else, or the next version of that. You know, it seemed like it could work out well. Because I just don't see how some of the things that we want, like the toy is a toy, and maybe it'd be the best thing to make, right? But I really, the discussion tools that we're lacking, we really need those. I mean, lots of people do this public conversation. We lack the tools. It's still a new enough thing. People aren't quite aware how much we lack the tools until they've done it a couple years. And then they might not know it's a lack of tools. They just think that the community is putrid. But like a conference report had pointed out, I've gotten onto this free speech and connection is great, but you have to have a way to say, well, I want some degrees of separation between me and this other person. And then you could both be in this big network, and you actually are interacting indirectly, and there could be some internal structure. To have proper connection, you have to have proper disconnection. To have, you need the right to free speech. You also need a right to free association, which means free disassociation. It means voluntary aspect to conversations that you're in. That seems like it's really needed, and yet I think there's 100,000 people, give or take, doing this kind of thing on YouTube. That's plenty of people to support a very robust, sustainable service of the tools for those people. But as I say, it takes those people years before they realize what tools are missing. But worse is that's not a very big market for companies like Google, Time Warner, or somebody that's going to make a website. That's not the size of the markets that they're going for. The internet itself is still young. They're going for the millions of people at a time ideas. So really the only way that these tools that we know we want are going to be created is if we create them. And that's what happens in science and engineering. Just a small group knows, and so they pay high for it. Or they actually hire the engineers themselves and make the software because they need it. Okay, and we could do something like that on a smaller scale, especially since right now the tools exist that you can bring them together and develop something in 6 months that puts the final interface that your type of usership needs, you know? Right? I mean, in the sense that lots of different sites might want to be able to post videos and have comment blogs. Facebook does it, YouTube does it. They focus on different things. We're focusing on the videos this way. We're focusing on your wall. We're focusing on the blogging comments, and we're focusing. And they're all the same kind of features. And if we need one that focuses on what we have, then we're going to have to make it. So I was kind of like, since I finally got back to that point, I felt like I'd put that project on hold as I rebuilt all the technology. Now it's all rebuilt, and I'm like, okay, I could start working on that again. But answering my own question, I mean, the map stuff is fun. I just love working on that. So, and I have a lot of it done. And that's another thing about Kickstarter, is it's good to have a demo to show that you can really do what you're planning to do. And I mean, it's about ready to release as an alpha proof of concept. So maybe that would be the best thing to have for a Kickstarter. Maybe the whole thing's ridiculous. I'm not really sure. quit my job with 6 months of work would be a bit risky. I'd do it though. I'd do it, and it wouldn't be right away. It takes a while to get those going. Anyway, I'd like to work on that. I can definitely write the code. I think that if I did the map as a Kickstarter, because I've done lots of design on what I have a whole philosophical and programmer theory and set of terminology about structured conversation. The map stuff, I've done a lot of visualization, but it's not like anyway, I'd like to talk about doing the map, just whole hog, like you're saying, conference report. Make the terrain react to what's going on in the map. Have weather, like Laura Levola was saying. Maybe we should brainstorm on that. I'd like to have a bunch of ideas, because I think I was getting to a point where I can imagine a lot more to do to it, but I was going to wrap it up and put it up and then start working on this debate stuff again. If we have a clear picture of where the map should go, another reason to do this in a Kickstarter is that I wouldn't want to have the whole vision. I would love a group of people, the people doing the Kickstarter together, or the people that had supported the money. Maybe that's a perk that they get, that they're part of this process. But obviously, before you can even put the project up, you have to know what you want to build. And yeah, I'm curious. Some of the ideas you were talking about were ambitious. I'd like to know if there's any gotchas. It's not hard to do the terrain. You're not going to do that in the JavaScript in the browser, but actually I've looked into this already. But it would be straightforward to render terrain, so it was dynamic. It's not like it has to change in real time, but you could have the server in control of the geology. To do that, a week or two to get the geology on there. Well, a week, less than a week to get geology generated and controlled, and then extra time integrating that. Like, okay, so now I can control it, but what's that mean? If I put a mountain somewhere and there's a house there, is the house supposed to move? If I put a river somewhere, do those houses get flooded, or do they just move to the side of the river? Definitely a lot could be done in 6 months. Okay. On the map, a lot could be done in 2 or 3 months. Here's the problem with that. I can't quit my job for 2 months of work. And I'm not sure there's a living running the server afterwards, because wouldn't this be better if it's just pretty much as free as could be? You don't want to pay $10 to be able to make a map, $10 a year to be able to make a map, do you? Or maybe you certainly don't want to have to pay to use somebody else's map, I don't think. This is a big part of my problem, is I love making internet toys and things, but it's like the typical thing I like to make, like when I made the origami box, if anybody remembers, takes pictures, 6 pictures, and splits them up, so when you fold the paper back together, the pictures are on the outside of the box. To me, that's a very useful, that's a worthwhile use of my time. But that's why I've mostly worked for other people in my life. I'd like something to happen, and I'm willing to take a risk with my own life, so that in the sense that that's what it is to say, you know what, I'm going to actually work on this full time and not look for a job, nothing else. This is what I'm going to get this done. And I would do it because I love it. I love this visualization. The big plan for me is I have a plan to create cyberspace piece by piece. And a realization that starting from the virtual reality, like trying to do a second life kind of thing, and I worked on something like that in the mid-90s. And I don't want to create a 3D world and fill it up with virtual things. I want to go to regular internet and pull that in piece by piece. I don't want to start with the 3D world. We'll get there, but I want to start with 2D maps, worlds, graph, space, just space at the basic level, a better, more, so our computer isn't just always a desktop. Play with more spatial metaphors and pull in information from the net to fill out those spaces. That's the big plan. The more I think of it, probably the map as a toy is the better thing, because if you're going by what attracts, the novelty, just by what, because generally that's an indication of what's more marketable. These maps, a map of like this of Twitter, which I don't follow Twitter, but they follow it on the news these days in Twitter storms. And if you had a map like this of Twitter channels, you see right away where the action is from the back and forths. If you think about it, it makes sense. That's how YouTube or Google knows what site to show in your search. It's by the links that are back and forth. Analyzing the relationships. That's what relativity says, is that all the real information is in the relationships. Can't find out what's going on at a website by going to that website. They're always going to tell you, yeah, stuff's going on. You find out by the interaction, who's linking to who, who's referring to who, who's referencing who. So probably the bigger market is for that, because everybody's dealing with this information overload, trying to follow all their Facebook likes or whatever. And they're doing it on lists, paper lists. It's like a bunch of paperwork. So only a few people are going to want to do the debate tool, but I feel it's socially important to make, but I don't have to make it first. I've arranged this weird situation where anything I work on, I keep getting parts for the other things that I want to work on. So the difficulty, it used to be the difficulty is if I work on this, I'm not working on this other code base. Oh, now I'm working on that. Now I'm not working on this code base. But now what I've done in the last 2 years is I have this one code base, and everything I work on, any little piece that might be usable in another component, naturally is, because I have everything very plug-in, rearrangeable. It's very easy to refactor. But it makes it all that more difficult to, to decide what sort of usable product, right? Because this is a way of developing a bunch of technology. But at some point you have to go, okay, now we're going to make this thing, and this is what it's going to do. So yeah, okay, let's say I worked on the map. What should it do in the long run? I like these ideas of there being some geology and plate tectonics. The terrain would be affected by activity on the map. I definitely like the weather one, and that's pretty straightforward. I think I can get some weather in there right away. There's some fun things we can do, because we can, of course, try to check comments, scan for certain words, and turn that into, like if there's fighting words in there, that could change the color of the line, or make a valley, or make a storm, or but also, my thing's reading YouTube, so if you put a little command in your video or in your comment, just a little thing, with square brackets or something for it that my system would read, then that could control the map. So people that were trying to control the map just in their interaction on YouTube and by writing their description a certain way and whatnot could cause map events, which I think would be interesting, because you only need, one person out of many to be consciously taking part like that. Like if there's 400 comments, and one of them says drama, then, in my little coded language, it probably is drama. I don't need all 200 commenters or whatever to say that. And if I do read all the comments, it might be hard to mathematically get the average of, what do I think's going on here? But anyway, even if that's the better solution, like to be able to get it without any special command language, during development, it would still be fun, because we could test things. Like, let's say we want to automatically detect something And we can't automatically detect it, but I can make everything but that, and and just a little plug-in that does the detection. I don't have that part. I make everything up to that, and when this part doesn't exist, well, I can still go in there and trigger it some special way through the command language. A lot could be done in 6 months. I know that, well, there's a lot of 3D toolkits available in terrain generation, but also I understand 3D. I made a cheesy little 3D renderer in JavaScript a couple years ago. So there's really no roadblocks. I've worked a lot in that kind of area. Yeah, let's flesh out some of the ideas and see how difficult, so I can try to figure out how difficult they might be and if they're in the scope of a 6-month project. Cheers.